He traded 15 years of marriage for a younger model, claiming my beauty had expired. The divorce papers came with a cruel price tag, pennies compared to his fortune. But when I walked into that charity gala 18 months later, the look on his face, priceless. This is how I made a billionaire beg. Before I tell you this story, I need you to do something for me. If you believe in karma, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from ashes, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel, because what I'm about to share with you isn't just my story. It's a testament to what happens when you stop letting someone else's blindness define your worth. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this. My name is Gabriel, and I used to be married to a billionaire. Notice I said used to be. That's not the tragic part of the story, though. That's actually where the good part begins. But let me take you back to where it all started, because you need to understand what I had before you can appreciate what I became. I met Donovan Ashford when I was 25 years old. I just finished my master's in violin performance at Manhattan School of Music, and I was playing at a fundraiser for cancer research. He was 31, this ambitious pharmaceutical entrepreneur with fire in his eyes and dreams bigger than the skyline outside his modest office in Queens. He wasn't a billionaire then. He was barely a millionaire, but he had this vision, this relentless drive that was magnetic. We fell in love the way people do in movies, quickly, intensely, completely. I was supposed to start a concert tour across Europe that summer, something I'd worked toward my entire life. But Donovan needed me. His company was at a critical junction. He had investors circling, deals on the table, and he was drowning in presentations and negotiations. He looked at me one night over Chinese takeout in his cramped apartment and said, "Gabrielle, I can't do this without you. You're my clarity. Stay. Help me build this. When we make it, you can have any stage in the world." So I stayed. I told myself it was temporary, that I was investing in our future together. I became his secret weapon, the elegant, articulate woman who could charm investors at dinner parties, who could proofread his proposals at 3 in the morning, who could host board members' wives while he closed deals. And it worked. God did it work. Ashford Pharmaceuticals grew from that cramped Queens office to a towering empire worth $3.2 billion. We had the penthouse in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. We had the villa in Tuscany where we spent summers. We were the couple everyone wanted to be, him in his Tom Ford suits, me in designer gowns at charity galas. Our picture in Forbes and Vanity Fair. We had 2 daughters, Naomi and Claire, 14 and 11 now, beautiful, brilliant girls who had their father's determination and, I'd like to think, my compassion. Life was perfect, or so I thought. Isn't that how these stories always begin? With someone being naive enough to think perfect could last. The cracks started showing around Donovan's 45th birthday. Subtle at first. He hired a personal trainer and started spending 2 hours at the gym every morning. He began using this expensive Swiss skincare line. His assistants got progressively younger and more attractive. But the real warning signs were in his words. These little comments he'd drop like poison, disguised as concern. "Are you tired? You look tired." He'd say this while I was getting ready for events, watching me in the mirror with this critical gaze I'd never seen before. "Maybe you should try that new dermatologist everyone's talking about. The one who does preventative work." Preventative. I was 41 years old. Remember when you used to wear those red dresses? The ones that hugged your curves? You should wear those again. Well, if they still fit. Each comment was a paper cut, small enough to ignore individually, but collectively they bled me dry. I started seeing myself through his increasingly critical eyes. Every line on my face became evidence of my failure. Every pound that shifted became proof I was letting myself go. I didn't recognize what was happening, that he was systematically destroying my self-worth to justify what was coming. I found the hotel receipts in his jacket pocket. The St. Regis, the Peninsula, the Mark, always the penthouse suites, always charged to his personal card, never to corporate. When I confronted him in our bedroom that night, he didn't even try to lie. He just looked at me with this cold, distant expression I'd never seen before and said, "I'm not happy anymore, Gabrielle." Her name was Lorelei, 28 years old, blonde, an Instagram influencer who'd reinvented herself as a wellness entrepreneur after her yoga poses went viral. They'd been together for 8 months. 8 months of him coming home and kissing our daughters goodnight. 8 months of him lying in our bed. 8 months of me planning our anniversary trip to Paris while he was planning his exit. But it was what he said during our divorce mediation that shattered me completely. His lawyer was droning on about asset division when Donovan interrupted, looked directly at me, and spoke with a casualness that felt rehearsed. "Let's be honest about why we're here. Gabrielle, you've lost your spark. Your beauty was always your best asset, and now it's fading. I need someone who inspires me, who makes me feel alive. I'm in my prime. I deserve to enjoy it with someone who's in theirs. I want you to understand something. I'd given up my dreams for this man. I'd spent 15 years building his empire, raising his children, being his perfect accessory, and he reduced me to a depreciating asset, beauty that was fading, as if I was a car losing value. The moment he drove me off the lot, the divorce was vicious. His lawyers painted me as a gold digger, conveniently forgetting that I'd been there when gold was just a dream. They used my lack of formal employment against me, as if those years of unpaid labor building his company counted for nothing. The judge was sympathetic, but bound by law. New York isn't a community property state, and we had a prenuptial agreement I'd signed when I was young and in love, and stupid enough to think love was enough. I got $12 million. Let me put that in perspective. It was less than 0.4% of his wealth, the wealth I'd helped him build. He kept the company, the Manhattan penthouse, the Tuscany villa, the art collection we'd curated together. He got primary custody of our daughters because he could provide better stability. The irony of that word still burns. I moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Modest for me meant something with working appliances and enough space for the girls when they visited. I'd watch Donovan's life continue, uninterrupted through social media and society pages. There he was at the Met Gala, with Lorelei draped on his arm. There they were on a yacht in Santorini. And there, in a close-up that made me physically ill, was my 15-carat diamond engagement ring on Lorelei's finger. He'd given her my ring. Our social circle evaporated overnight. Turns out, billionaires have friends, and ex-wives have memories. I'd sit in my Brooklyn apartment, scrolling through photos of people I'd considered friends at parties I wasn't invited to, celebrating a man who discarded me like I was nothing. The worst part wasn't the money or the lifestyle. It was looking in the mirror and seeing what he'd claimed to see. A woman whose value had expired, whose beauty had faded, who wasn't enough anymore. I was 42 years old and felt ancient, used up, worthless. The turning point came 6 months after the divorce was finalized. My daughter Claire had stayed over for the weekend, and we were making breakfast together. Well, I was burning toast while she laughed at me. Then she got quiet, and in that way children have of asking devastating questions with innocent curiosity, she said, "Mommy, did Daddy leave because you're not pretty anymore?" I dropped the spatula. This beautiful 11-year-old girl was staring at me with her father's eyes, asking if the lesson she should learn from her parents' marriage was that a woman's value expires with her youth. In that moment, I realized what I'd been doing. I'd been letting Donovan's cruelty become my truth. I'd been teaching my daughters that a man's opinion of them mattered more than their opinion of themselves. I knelt down, took Claire's hands, and said, "No, baby. Daddy left because he forgot what real beauty looks like, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you and your sister never forget." That afternoon, I drove to a storage unit in New Jersey, where I'd kept things from my old life. Buried under boxes of designer clothes I'd never wear again was my violin case, dusty and abandoned. I hadn't played in 15 years. I brought it home, opened it, and the instrument looked back at me like an old friend I'd betrayed. The first week, I could barely play for more than 10 minutes before my fingers cramped and tears blurred my vision. But I kept going. I reached out to my old professor from Manhattan School of Music, Dr. Helena Winters, terrified she'd forgotten me. Instead, she invited me to her office and told me something that changed everything. She said there were private donors looking to fund music education programs in underserved communities, but they needed someone with credibility and passion to lead it. Someone who understood that music wasn't a luxury, it was survival. She looked at me and said, "Gabrielle, you used to talk about this constantly, about how music saved you as a kid growing up in Detroit. Remember? Is that dream dead or just sleeping?" I used my settlement strategically. Every dollar became a brick in a new foundation. Literally, I created Harmony Rising, a nonprofit dedicated to providing free music education and instruments to children in low-income neighborhoods throughout New York and New Jersey. We partnered with schools in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Newark, places where arts programs had been gutted by budget cuts. But here's what made it different from the performative charity I'd done as Donovan's wife. I didn't just write checks and pose for photos. I showed up. I taught master classes. I performed for these kids, really performed, pouring 15 years of abandonment and rediscovery into every note. I watched their faces light up when they realized that music could be theirs, that they didn't have to be rich or connected or perfect to deserve beauty in their lives. One of my students, a 15-year-old from the South Bronx named Marcus, had never touched an instrument before joining our program. 6 months later, he earned a full scholarship to Juilliard. A local news station covered his story, and they interviewed me about the foundation. The reporter asked what inspired Harmony Rising, and I answered honestly. I forgot who I was for a long time. Music reminded me. I want these kids to never forget. That clip went viral. Suddenly, international press was calling. The Guardian ran a feature. Former billionaire's wife finds purpose in music education. Forbes did a profile on nonprofits with measurable impact. But it wasn't the attention that mattered. It was that the work was real. The impact was genuine. And for the first time in 15 years, I was building something that was mine. Major donors took notice. We expanded to 3 more cities. I published a report on the correlation between music education and academic performance in underserved communities. I testified before the New York City Council about arts funding. I was becoming someone I'd never been before. Not Donovan's wife, not anyone's appendage, but Gabrielle, just Gabrielle. And she was magnificent. 18 months after my divorce, I received an invitation to the Metropolitan Museum's annual philanthropy gala. $10,000 a plate, the kind of event I used to attend on Donovan's arm, wearing borrowed confidence and forced smiles. But this invitation was different. Harmony Rising was being honored for community impact, and I was invited as a guest of honor. My first instinct was to decline. The thought of seeing Donovan and Lorelei, of facing that world again, made my hands shake. But Naomi found the invitation on my counter and said, "Mom, you have to go. You have to show him who you really are, who I really was, not who he'd said I was, but who I'd become." I wore a deep emerald gown, not because it was expensive, but because green had always been my color. Before Donovan convinced me I looked better in black and navy, colors that helped me fade into the background of his shine. I wore my natural hair in an elegant crown of braids, the hair he'd always wanted me to straighten for professional events. And I walked into that gala with Dr. Winters and 3 of my students whose lives had been transformed by Harmony Rising. The moment I entered that gilded hall, I felt eyes turn. Whispers rippled through the crowd. And then I saw him. Donovan was standing near the bar with Lorelei, and the expression on his face when he saw me was something I'll treasure forever. It wasn't attraction, though that was there. It was shock mixed with something deeper, recognition. He was seeing me, really seeing me, Maybe for the first time in years, Lorelei looked uncomfortable in her designer gown, clinging to his arm with the desperation of someone who knows she's interchangeable. She saw where he was looking and followed his gaze, and I watched her face fall. Then came my moment on stage. The MC introduced Harmony Rising's work, showed a video of my students performing, shared statistics about our impact. When he called my name, the room erupted in a standing ovation. I gave a speech I'd written and rewritten a dozen times about finding yourself after loss, about how real beauty comes from purpose, about how the most valuable things we build are the lives we touch. The camera panned across the audience during my speech, and I saw Donovan's face on the screen. His jaw was clenched. Lorelei was whispering urgently in his ear, but he wasn't listening. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret, longing, loss. After my speech, I was surrounded by donors and journalists. I was riding this incredible high when I felt a presence beside me at the bar. I knew before I turned around that it was him. Gabriel. His voice was softer than I remembered. You look incredible, not just physically, though you do, but different. Like you're lit from within. I turned to face him. Up close, I could see he'd aged too. I made a mistake. The words tumbled out like he'd been rehearsing them. I was going through something, a crisis, or whatever therapists call it. I thought youth and novelty would make me feel alive. But it's all so empty, Gabrielle. Lorelei is exhausting. Everything is performance with her. Every meal is content. Every moment is calculated for social media. There's no substance, no depth. I miss you. I miss us. I let him finish. I even let him continue, as he told me how the business was struggling without my insight, how our daughters barely spoke to him, how he'd traded everything real for something shiny and hollow. Part of me had fantasized about this moment, imagined the satisfaction I'd feel, but standing there listening to him, I felt something unexpected. Nothing. Not hatred, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just nothing. Are you asking me to come back? I asked. I'm asking if there's a chance, if we could try again. Start over. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed, then buzzed again. All around us, phones were lighting up. Someone near us gasped. The energy in the room shifted. Breaking news. Ashford Pharmaceuticals was under federal investigation for price-fixing schemes. The stock had just crashed 67% in after-hours trading. Donovan's face went white as his phone exploded with calls. Over the next 3 months, I watched his empire crumble. The investigation revealed practices I'd known nothing about. Things that happened after I left. His net worth plummeted from $3.2 billion to around $890 million. Still wealthy, still comfortable, but publicly humiliated. His face on the news wasn't the confident tycoon anymore. It was a man caught, diminished, exposed. And Lorelei, she left him exactly 6 weeks after the scandal broke. Sold her story to a tabloid. I didn't sign up for this level of stress and bad PR. The ring, my ring, appeared in an online auction. Even his trophy had a price tag. Meanwhile, Harmony Rising received a $50 million anonymous donation that was later revealed to come from a tech mogul whose son I'd mentored. We expanded to 12 cities. I signed a book deal for my memoir, The Beauty of Becoming. TED invited me to speak. My daughters were thriving, proud of their mother in a way they'd never been when I was just their father's wife. 6 months after that gala, Donovan showed up at my foundation's office. No warning, no appointment. My assistant buzzed me. There's a Donovan Ashford here to see you. He looked smaller somehow, defeated. The arrogance had been burned away by consequence, leaving behind something raw and almost human. I'm not here to ask you back, he said, sitting across from my desk uninvited. I'm here to ask for forgiveness. What I said to you, what I did, there's no excuse. You gave up everything for me, and I convinced you that you were the one who wasn't enough. I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I destroyed. I let the silence sit between us for a moment. Then I spoke, my voice calm and clear. You taught me the most valuable lesson, Donovan. You showed me that my beauty, the real kind, had nothing to do with you. It was always in here. I touched my heart. And here, I touched my head. Thank you for leaving. You freed me to bloom into someone I could never have become in your shadow. I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. So there's no chance. No, I interrupted gently. The woman you divorced doesn't exist anymore. And the woman I became would never settle for someone who only valued her when she was gone. He left my office, and I watched him go without regret. That night, I played violin for my daughters in our cozy Brooklyn living room. We ordered pizza. We laughed. We were happy, genuinely, completely, impossibly happy. And I realized something profound. I'd won. Not because he'd lost everything, not because karma had caught up with him, but because I'd discovered that my value was never his to determine in the first place. They say beauty fades. They're right. But beauty that comes from purpose, from passion, from knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth, that only grows stronger with time. Donovan lost billions and his family chasing youth. I lost a marriage but found myself. And the woman I became is worth more than any empire he could have offered me. If this story resonated with you, I need you to do something. Smash that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by anyone's inability to see it. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about resilience, karma, and comeback. And drop a comment telling me, what would you have said to Donovan in that final moment? Remember this, your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Beauty fades, power shifts, but purpose is eternal.